I'm Mike O'Sullivan. I'm the CEO of One SouthCoast Chamber. And welcome to the 2023 Legislative Luncheon. I'm the CEO, and my cohort, Rick Kidder, he expresses his regret for not being here, but he is currently recovering from surgery. He's doing great. I talk to him every day. He's doing great, and I try not to talk to him about work. But I do want to tell you one thing that Katie pointed out to me as we were going through the script for today, is that we didn't have to change that line from last year to this year. This year, Rick had his knee replaced, and last year he had his hip replaced. So just to point out, we didn't have to change that line in the whole script. We change a lot of it. We tweak a lot of it from year to year when we have a similar event, similar time of year. But he is doing great. I'm very happy to report. I told him I would report that. He's feeling better. He's not a great sleeper anyway, which is probably way too much information. But he's doing good. He's doing very well, and we're happy for him. So the annual One South Coast Legislative Luncheon is designed to bring information to the South Coast area businesses and the business community on relevant local, state, sometimes federal issues which influence you and your business. This luncheon is an excellent opportunity to hear firsthand from our elected representatives, our business community leaders, while exchanging ideas and gaining valuable insight. So we'd like to recognize our premier sponsors. We have South Coast Health. You guys are over here. Thank you for being here. And we also have St. Anne's Credit Union, which is right in front of me. And we would also like to recognize our corporate sponsor, the Southeastern Massachusetts Visitors Bureau. So thank you for your continued dedication to the South Coast, because without your support, important events like this would definitely not be possible. So we will hear from our panel shortly, but first I'd like to acknowledge members of our delegation who are here right now, and I'll try to acknowledge the ones that are on their way at that time. First, we have Massachusetts State Senator Michael Rodrigues. We have State Representative Carole Fiola, State Representative Stephen Howitt, and State Representative Chris Hendricks. And coming back to the table, is
Getting introduced or getting chocolate chip cookie?
Considering I already ate a chocolate chip cookie, I'll say getting the chocolate chip cookie. But, and obviously, State Representative Pat Haddad. He had to check out early because his phone kept ringing, but we also did have the mayor of Fall River was here as a guest, but Paul had to leave. He apologized, sends his apologies. So Dr. Rayford Kruger, President and CEO of South Coast Health, couldn't be here today, and he asked me to deliver the following remarks on his behalf and on behalf of South Coast Health. For more than 25 years, which I just learned yesterday is actually 2 years more than 25 years, today is the actual 27th anniversary of South Coast Health merging and coming together in what I'll say is as close to the way it's structured as you could today. But really, it's so today is the 27th anniversary of a great day for healthcare in our region. So thank you to everybody, and thank you, Bill Burns, for pointing that out to me yesterday, because it is really an important day. So for 27 years, South Coast Health has served communities across southeastern Mass and Rhode Island as the largest provider of primary and specialty care in the region. The not-for-profit charitable system includes 3 acute care hospitals: Charlton Memorial in Fall River, St. Luke's in New Bedford, which is a level 2 trauma center, and Toby in Wareham, as well as a network of over 700 physicians, hospitals, and mid-level practitioners. South Coast Health has established 6 urgent care centers, 2 cancer centers, a visiting nurse association, and numerous ambulatory facilities that ensure convenient access to services for 725,000 residents in 33 communities covering 900 square miles. Who would have thought the South Coast is that big? In addition, the system partners with Acadia Healthcare to offer expanded resources at South Coast Behavioral Health in Dartmouth. South Coast Health is a Newsweek's World's Best Hospital from 2019 to 2023. In 2021, St. Luke's was named to Newsweek and Leapfrog's Best Maternity Hospitals for the 2nd consecutive year, while U.S. News ranked South Coast among the best hospitals in Massachusetts and in the Providence metro area. For 5 straight years, South Coast Health has earned Best Hospitals and Best Place to Work in South Coast Media Group's Best of the Best awards, voted on by residents and readers. With upward of 7,500 employees, South Coast Health is the largest employer in southeastern Massachusetts and one of the largest employers in the Commonwealth, according to the Boston Business Journal. To learn more about South Coast Health, you can visit southcoast.org or follow them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, or ask any one of our friends at their table. And again, today marks the 27th anniversary of Charlton Memorial, St. Luke's, and Toby Hospitals becoming South Coast Health. So thank you, South Coast Health, for your commitment to the betterment of our communities. Thank you. So next, please join me in welcoming Eileen Danahy, President and CEO of St. Anne's Credit Union and Chair of the One South Coast Board of Directors. Thank you, Eileen.
Good morning, everyone. I am Eileen Danahy, the President and CEO of St. Anne's Credit Union and Chair of the One South Coast Chamber of Commerce. It is an honor to be here today as a premier sponsor of this event, and I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the One South Coast Chamber for organizing this gathering. It serves as a testament to the strong collaboration between the business community and our esteemed legislative leaders, which is vital for the growth and prosperity of our region. As we gather here today, I am reminded of the powerful impact that unity and cooperation can have on our local community. As a sponsor of this event, along with South Coast Health and Southeastern Mass Visitors Bureau, we all proudly stand alongside our fellow business leaders, elected officials, and community stakeholders who share our vision of a prosperous South Coast region. We are fortunate to have a diverse range of businesses represented here today, each contributing to our local economy. Together, we recognize the critical role that cooperation plays in tackling the challenges and seizing the opportunities that lie ahead. Our elected officials play a pivotal role in shaping policies and creating an environment that supports economic development and job creation. We are grateful for their dedicated service and their willingness to engage with the business community, listen to our needs, and work together to overcome challenges. I urge you to leverage the connections you make here to engage and to explore new avenues of collaboration. Together, we can build a stronger, more resilient South Coast community that is poised for success in the years to come. In closing, I'd like to share with you some upcoming events where you can do just that. St. Anne's is sponsoring the next One South Coast Chamber Business After Hours on June 22nd. At the Cove in Fall River, and our very own annual pre-summer concert, which we've held every year right through the pandemic, thanks to our marketing team. It's scheduled for August 26th this year at Heritage State Park, and this year we have a Tom Petty tribute band, and that is free for everyone. We welcome you to join us. Please also be sure to stop by our marketing table. You can get some giveaways as well as information on the events. And thank you all. We really hope you enjoy the conversation. Thank you all of our legislators for being here.
Thank you, Eileen. Our panel is looking forward to answering your questions. If you haven't done so already, please write down your questions on the sheets of paper provided in the center of your table, and someone from the Chamber staff will come by and collect them throughout the luncheon. Our panel will answer as many questions as time allows. But we'd like to thank our legislators for all their hard work on behalf of the people and the businesses of the South Coast, including South Coast Rail, Blue Economy Initiatives, pandemic responses, their deliberative ARPA process. And the Chamber is very fortunate to be representing the business community in a community that has the luxury of having such great support. So thank you very much. Before we get started, thank you very much to our legislators. So now we will get started on the question and answers. We have a couple questions to start with, but please, as you fill in your questions, the staff will pick them up, and they'll gladly bring them up, and I will be happy to read them, and whichever legislator is more appropriate to answer for, they'd be happy to. So thank you very much. So I think this is probably for Senator Rodrigues, but I'll leave it to him to answer. It was just uncovered recently that the previous administration had made a $2.5 billion error in using federal funds for unemployment during the pandemic. How can the legislature address this important issue without placing more on the backs of the business community who are still reeling from the responsibility of repaying billions to the trust fund? You're on, sir.
I'm on. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's great. It's great to be here. I actually had a meeting yesterday, a briefing with Secretary Jones. Information is still being gathered. What it appears has happened, there were no less than 7 federal pandemic-era supplemental unemployment insurance support programs. Remember the PUA, folks, where we provided, actually the federal government provided unemployment benefits for individuals where heretofore were never entitled to unemployment benefits, those that were independent contractors, so-called gig employees, 1099 employees. There was a supplement at the beginning of the pandemic. There was a $600 per week supplemental federal payment on top of the state unemployment benefit. Then there were 2 subsequent $300, and then there were extended benefits. So the prior administration made some mistakes. Keep in mind, none of it was nefarious. It wasn't like they intentionally used federal money where they should have used money out of the state unemployment insurance trust fund. Keep this fact in mind. They paid out what would average out to be 10 years of unemployment benefits in 10 months. March 1st of 2020, Massachusetts, as you remember, pre-pandemic, we were pretty much at full employment. The economy was booming, less than 2% unemployment. There were about 110,000 people collecting unemployment in Massachusetts. April 1st of 2020, there was 1.5 million people collecting unemployment, and the system couldn't handle it. We're still trying to get to the bottom of it because this is the third audit since this happened. The first 2 audits performed by KPMG did not uncover it. This particular audit did uncover it. The audit was conducted by our state's comptroller, so we self-reported. Commonwealth of Massachusetts self-reported on the error. So we're in discussions now with the U.S. Department of Labor to try to get it waived, to be honest with you, because we imagine that this error not just happened in Massachusetts, but pretty much I would imagine it happened throughout the country. And so, you know, the bottom line is if the federal government does not waive it, it will be a responsibility for the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, because that's the trust fund that should have paid those benefits. But it's going to, you know, it's still a work in progress. It's only been unveiled about a week that we discovered this.
Thank you very much, Senator, and I know you'll keep us apprised as time marches on, so thank you very much for that. Tourism is the 3rd largest industry in the Commonwealth and severely underfunded compared to other states. Attempts to increase funding for tourism have routinely been a low priority for the legislature, except during pandemic relief. How can the Commonwealth start to catch up on increasing the Tourism Trust Fund, which has remained the same for quite a long time?
Hi, Michael. Well, since I recently served as chair of that committee, I'm now on a different chairmanship, but you're right. It's always been something that I think there's been an attitude of people come, they come for education, they come to this world-class Boston, healthcare, education, and people find their way around. But we know, and we learned through the pandemic just how important tourism was, along with arts and culture. And we did boost very extensively the funding. Mass Cultural Council typically is one of the organizations that benefits peripherally, and they usually get they got around $16, $18 million. We upped it to we gave them an extra $60 million to disperse throughout the Commonwealth, and now have subsequently boosted their baseline number to, I think it was $25 million this budget period. As far as tourism, there's going to be new tourism focus through the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism. I think that this administration has a little bit more focus on that, and I think what's brought their attention to it is the fact that we're going to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, and while every state in the country are doing so, we certainly have a special place for that where it all began. So they're looking to boost funding there in the millions, and so I think people see it as important. I think that when we look at our budget, we're coming on a 56, we're in the midst of finalizing budgets between the House and the Senate, $56 billion budget, of course, with healthcare taking up, I use the word about half, a little less than half of that, and education and so many other areas. We do value tourism, and I think you're going to see a continued increase, but you're right, it isn't the top area of our budget.
Thank you, Carol. Small regional tourism councils like Bristol County's have always had the challenge of making the match in private dollars. Would you be open to establishing a graduated method for private matches that would allow smaller RTCs to match at a lower rate than 1-to-1?
This is my follow-up to that. We have waived it last many years because, as you know, if you were an organization, the Battleship, for example, and you wanted to benefit, you had to match whatever was given. And as a nonprofit, you all know, you work with nonprofits, you donate to nonprofits, you volunteer with nonprofits. It's a lot of work. And just trying to put your message out there, having that helping hand of those funds are critical. And so we realized that trying to, especially during the pandemic, to ask all of you for money to help support that and to justify a match was ridiculous. So I think what you see is we've waived it each year. And we'll probably continue to do that for a little bit until we say, hey, maybe we should do that permanently. Once we see through the next couple of sessions, probably. But we've waived it. I don't think there's any reason we're not. To make something permanent becomes permanent. So I think we'll probably continue to take it on a case-by-case basis, a year-by-year basis, until such time we feel, it makes sense. It's working out that way. So.
Great. Thank you very much, Carol. We appreciate that. And I will testify, especially through Arts and Culture in New Bedford and in Fall River, that Arts and Culture did very well in the South Coast during your tenure there. So it's greatly appreciated. But it wasn't just the South Coast. It was all over the state. And Arts and Culture is definitely an economic driver, at least in my opinion anyway. What are your thoughts on a home rule petition or statewide rent stabilization act? Anybody can answer.
I'll be brief. I'm a no.
I'll just say there are a number of, just to give a little perspective, and I think what the senator's view is probably pretty, has proven pretty well. I think there's a majority of the legislators feel that way. We have a number of bills before us, and that's why you're mentioning this. Not just a home, Boston has put that out. It has yet to be heard in committee. It's in housing right now. There's a couple of rent control bills. One put out by the mayor of Boston and one put out by some legislators, both House and Senate. And I think what the Senate is very direct. It's got to follow its process, but there has not been an appetite for a lot of reasons. And I think we're providing so many tools from the legislature to help communities, help individuals through all the programming that we do, that I'm not so sure that that's where we're going to end up.
If I could say a piece on that, it's as a member of the Housing Committee, I think that that's kind of a big step. I think a lot of us will agree on that. I've been of the opinion that everything should be considered or on the table, but I also acknowledge that we've done there's a lot of bills at the State House that provide tenant protections that don't go as far as rent control or rent stabilization. Things like letting tenants or mandating that landlords let tenants spread out the upfront cost over the first 6 months of a tenancy. Things like providing legal support and resources in the housing court for those facing eviction. So there are a number of things that we can do, I think, before we even have that conversation. As obviously it is a political hot potato in many respects. So I think, as a member of the Housing Committee, I think we should consider all the other options short of rent stabilization.
Go ahead, Paul.
So I'm a no, too. I work a lot with the ag community, and one of the issues that I hear most often is the difficulty in finding housing for people to work on farms. And we're all really focused on growing our agricultural community, increasing our capacity to produce food, and getting more local healthy food into our schools and underserved urban areas. But we can't do it without housing. So, and of course, you hear that about so many components of the economy, but it is very real for the agricultural community. And, speaking as somebody who lives in Westport, golly gee, Westport really does have to do more in terms of housing. And everybody in Westport agrees. I think a generation ago there was really a pushback about affordable housing. But affordable housing now means that the fire chief's kids can live in town. I mean, that's what affordable housing is in Westport. And we have challenges in Westport about affordable housing because we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have town water, town sewer, which really makes any program that much more expensive. But we're working on it. We're working on trying to bring water and sewer down Route 6, which would have extraordinary benefits in terms of economic development, housing, and also the environment. And I think working on housing production is a more effective way than talking about fighting against the forces of the economy.
Good, Tony. Good. No, good.
Go ahead,
Tony.
Chris. Chris, you start, and then Tony
sure.
will go.
I think when you look at this, you have to look at it in a holistic approach for housing and a realistic approach. And I think one of the things that has made our country great and created a middle class was home ownership. And we don't do enough for home ownership. There are many obstacles to it. So I'll try to be brief but explain some of it. One, zoning. New Bedford, Fall River have very little land that they can actually build houses in. Dartmouth, Westport, Freetown, Acushnet, Fairhaven, all have the ability to accept housing. Now the question is can people afford it, and is the zoning requirements? When you have all these single-family homes, because they want to keep everybody out, That makes it very difficult. So one thing that I would suggest to you guys, because you all have the ability and influence over people in your own towns, is talk about that with your your planning board or your selectmen, because how New Bedford goes and how Fall River goes is how our towns go. Many of the people who own the businesses in New Bedford and in Dartmouth and in Fall River live in Dartmouth, Westport, Fairhaven, Mattapoisett, all the way up to Freetown. If we don't have the employees to live in our communities, you're not going to have a company to be able to afford your employees. And one of the problems is, if you look, just take for example in Dartmouth, along Russell's Mills Road, there is a Ponegantset village. Single-family ranches, tons of them. They were built in the 60s. We need those types of developments within the communities of Freetown. We need to do that again. We need to do that in Dartmouth again. We need to find places where we're congested housing altogether and it's low income and that's it. We need two things, I think, in Dartmouth or in towns is 55 and over communities, less services, more tax base, allows people to move out of the north end of New Bedford into a community as they get 75, 80 years old. They can still live on their own and they can have a house. That opens up that market in, say, the north end of New Bedford, where you can now buy a house off of Phillips Road. If you don't have that progress of, I'm going to buy a one-family, small, two-bedroom house, then move up in 10 years or 8 years, depending on how I go, and don't create that equity, we're missing out on a whole generation of housing. And it's a sacrifice to some people, but someone's got to do it at some point. And if we don't change the zoning and we all keep single-family housing with 250-foot frontage, like I think in Rehoboth, who can afford a house? Who can afford a house in Dartmouth unless you got 150-foot frontage? It's ridiculous that we're doing it this way. And we need to really think about how we do our zoning to allow that. And the other thing is subsidize. I don't know if there's any developers here who own a bunch of multifamily homes. I'll probably offend you, but subsidized housing in Section 8, all it does is make LLCs richer. Guys who own companies richer. It's subsidizing their income. They're getting money from the state to own a house that someone, if they could be owner-occupied, would be way better off. If you're owner-occupied, you're renting out the second floor like many immigrants did back in the day, and then they move on and open that up for their children or whoever, and they do the same thing. All we're doing is paying an LLC a bunch of money so that they can afford to have people who will perpetuate the subsidized housing. And if we don't talk about that stuff that's politically incorrect, we're going to miss out on the opportunity. So one thing is back home, talk to your selectmen about the zoning and making sure. Encourage 55 and over housing. And also first-time homebuyer programs. They are available in New Bedford and Fall River, but not in the towns. And those are the things I think that would get us out of this idea of the only answer is to subsidize rentals and to provide a cap on rent. I just don't think the long term is good for us. So I would encourage you to participate in that way back home.
Thank you, Chris. Tony?
Well, good afternoon. I don't think if this thing is on or not, but housing is a big issue, really. As you can see, all of us have something to say about it. I have office hours every month, the first Saturday of the month. This has been the #1 issue every Saturday or first Saturday of the month. Most of it from a tenant perspective, as you can imagine. My district is all in the city, and there is a lot of pain out there, a lot of hurt out there. So, but I'll begin with the home rule petition. I strongly believe any home rule petition, be around rent control, be about charter schools. As you can imagine, we had one so-called from New Bedford got killed. It will get killed every time. Whenever a home rule petition goes up, pretending to be a home rule petition, but really has impact on statewide policy, doesn't really have a shot of passing as a home rule petition. So that's what I'll say on that. In terms of I think Chris is right, and I agree with Chris on the issue. Chris, meaning Hendricks, on the issue of you got to create.
No
a
one
balance.
agrees with me.
We
That's
gotta
why I come in late and sit at the end.
I'll get to the other Chris. You got to create a balance. I think you got to have a balance between the landlords, because you have also very small landlords, okay, and there's not just the big landlords. You have a small landlord that owns a 3-decker and lives sometimes on one of those apartments, so they have those issues as well. But also, I think you have to create a balance between, like, legal representation in the housing court is absolutely crucial for tenants. They don't have none of them. If you sit there on a day down on that strip mall in the north end, right? That's where the housing court is right now. Hopefully in the future will be someplace else with more dignity. I mean, landlords will win every time because they have a lawyer, they have an attorney with them. The tenant does not. So I think that's a very important issue for us to tackle and resolve and make sure that there is legal representation for those tenants. I mean, just a couple of months ago, I had a retired woman, a woman that's been retired now for some time, who lives on Independence Street in the South End, right? Everybody knows Independence Street, off County Street, between County and Crapo. In the old days, primarily homes owned by Portuguese immigrants. And actually, the house that she was living in was owned by a Portuguese immigrant, was paid for. Her rent was $600 a month. There's a new owner. The immigrant cashed in his investment, and the new owner wants $1,400 of rent. Do you know what her Social Security check is? $1,400. So what's the solution for someone like that? And that's just one example. I can give you dozens of examples that come into my office hours. So how do we resolve those situations? Here's a woman who worked all her life, lives on Social Security. She lives alone at this point. How do you resolve that? I didn't have an answer for her that day, but we're working with her to try to resolve the situation. Obviously, has to be some kind of subsidized housing, be public housing, or be Section 8, or whatever it might be. But those lists are humongous in New Bedford. And that's where I think Chris is right. The surrounding towns have to do more around affordable housing or subsidized housing. Because the lists in New Bedford are, in some cases, 2 years. So this lady does not have 2 years to wait, right? Because the landlord is going to evict her. Already had moved, done the paperwork to evict her. So that's really the reality out there. So we need to do more. We have to build more housing. Both, by the way, both market rate, because we in New Bedford, we need more market rate. Fall River needs more market rate so we can attract young families into the city that has some extra income to spend and perhaps also at some point buy some property in the city eventually after. And yes, we have to be the raft program, which is very effective, by the way, and some landlords benefited from that too during the pandemic. Each renter that fell behind on their rent was eligible for $10,000 to bring them up to date on their rent. The landlord would have to agree and sign on. Most of them did. Some didn't, by the way, I didn't quite understand that logic. I actually went twice in the last 7 months to the Landlords Association of New Bedford and Fall River to talk to them. At that point, to encourage them, participate with your tenant. You're going to get your money, or else you're not going to get the money. You can evict them, but you're not going to get your money because they can't afford to pay you. So we have, fortunately, we've been working on this program called HDIP, which is market rate housing for gateway cities. The last session, we were able to have it on the economic development bill, but that didn't work out between the House and the Senate. This year, the Senate is going to include it on its tax package or tax relief package, and I think that's a great move. I think from our side, we're going to try to convince our own Ways and Means that that's the right to go. I believe they are convinced because I had a conversation with Chairman Michael, and they understand, they support the issue. I'm not quite sure why we're not able to put it on the House side, but that's politics. I'm sure the senator knows why. They got to have stuff to negotiate, right? But having said that, I think you have to look at both sides. No one is trying to shortchange landlords either, and especially small landlords. I mean, I know many people who live in my district that are small landlords, and they struggle as well. They have 3 deckers that need to be remodeled to attract young people, right? So they can have all the toys and the bells and whistles. They're not going. They don't want to rent there, right? They want to rent maybe at Wamsutta Mills and other places. So that's a big issue, very big issue. If I may just touch quickly on the unemployment issue, because that's the other big constituent service that comes every month to my office. Yes, the Department of Labor has done an awful job managing the unemployment. It's not a fault of one or the other. Their own software is outdated. Software can even communicate with other state agencies, never mind communicating with constituents, right? So they need to upgrade their software to begin with, and if they had, probably they would have caught some of these issues that they were not able to catch in real time. But there are also folks out there, so you'll know, that are still waiting to collect unemployment this year. I have a fellow who was laid off in December. He's yet to receive a check. The good thing is he's back working again. He started working towards the end of March, but he still has not collected those checks from December to March. It's just the place is just chaotic, cumbersome, and they need to and I'm not here to blame anybody, any individual or any governor per se. It's just about we need really to invest in that department and make things work the right way. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
If I could, Mike, I had the first word and it was no, right? Yeah, when asked about rent control, which I feel is the most tried and failed public housing program that's ever existed. It's been tried many times, and it doesn't work because it just completely disincentivizes any investment in the property. But my colleagues all had a lot of great things to say about housing. Housing is the #1 issue facing the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, without a doubt. We've been hearing and reading a lot about out-migration, the fact that Massachusetts lost about 100,000 residents, a little over 100,000 residents last year. And, it's the millionaire's tax, it's the surtax, it's the fact that, our capital gains tax rate is bifurcated, short-term capital gains is higher. And, people, my whole life, people have been retiring and moving to Florida and Arizona, right? The weather's better, you can play golf 12 months a year, not 6 or 7, and so the demographic that worries me a lot that we're losing is the 25 to 40-year-old. They're not moving because they don't want to pay the extra 4% surtax on their adjusted gross income over $1 million. They're not moving because they're day trading on Wall Street and they're worried about the capital gains rate. They're moving because they can't afford housing. So we recognize that. In this budget that is before the conference committee for the first time, there's over $1 billion invested in housing programs in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Representative Cabral mentioned that yesterday, we in the Senate, my Committee on Ways and Means, released our version of the tax relief plan that includes HDIP, that would invest, there's a $10 million per year cap currently on HDIP. There's $57 million worth of backlog projects that are just waiting for this financing to put shovels in the ground and build housing units. We're proposing to fully fulfill that backlog this current year, to get these shovels in the ground and get these housing units built, and to raise the annual cap from currently $10 million to $30 million per year to keep up with the demand. We need units. It's simple economic supply and demand. We just need more units. And the biggest impediment to housing growth in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is absolutely local home rule. It's the fact that the community that Paul and I live in Westport, it's what, 80,000 square foot lots, 200 feet of frontage. So you can't afford to build an affordable starter home with those type of requirements, because let's face it, the last person to move into Westport wants to be the last person to move into Westport, right? I'm in, close the door behind me, no more, no more. Where are my children going to go? Where are my grandchildren going to go? Where are your children? And it's not just Westport. I live there, so I can say it, but it's every community around. So we need housing production. We're going to do what we can in providing the tools for both private and public developers of housing units. But I think it's an incredible problem that we have to get a handle on it, or else we're going to lose the most important demographic in our community, the young families just starting off, the 25 to 40-year-olds.
If I may, very quickly, going back to housing. Since Senator Rodrigues talked about out-migration from the state, as you know, we've had out-migration from cities for many years now, from New Bedford, from Fall River, and our industrial and commercial base has sort of been also out-migrating to, let's say, Dartmouth or other places. And those homeowners in the city, and I'll speak for New Bedford, because I live in New Bedford and I pay property taxes in New Bedford. As soon as you have an opportunity, and I don't blame them, right? Why are you going to pay $14, $15 on 1,000 when you can pay $6 in Westport? Doesn't make any sense, right? So if you can afford to migrate out, you're going to do that. And so those of us living in the city, I mean, we are overburdened, right? And there doesn't seem to be any relief around that issue. And that's something we need also. And additional housing will help us as well, and hopefully additional businesses too. Instead of, it happens all the time, and I know it's a business decisions, but at some point, your workers won't be able to live even in New Bedford, right? Even if they own a house. Because we know, like the business park, we should call it, if you have a choice, you're going to build in Dartmouth, not in the New Bedford side, because your property tax is going to be 50% less, right? So this is, in the end, it's going to be a race to the bottom for all of us at some point. I know there are families now that cannot afford to really pay I'm not talking about people who own 3 acres, I'm talking about people who own single families in New Bedford, right? That their property taxes are absolutely outrageous. I'll say that today, I'll say that tomorrow. Doesn't matter who's here from the city or not. That's just a reality. We have to. And that's the other out-migration that we have to really address, both from the business side and from the residential side. Because even the businesses have been doing that with New Bedford. I don't know about Fall River, and I'm not going to talk for Fall River, but in New Bedford.
Mike, if I could just add as an exclamation point, when the senator said it is the #1 problem, the #1 issue, clearly you see why it is, and it is where we get the calls, we're feeling it. It's the first time I've gotten calls from community people from other towns calling and say, I need a place for so-and-so to live. And Fall River and New Bedford have always been the answer of affordability. Oh, Fall River. Finally, we've 30 years in the making, plans to improve our community, gentrify just a little bit, and provide amenities and quality of life that we so deserve in a Fall River and New Bedford. And people are almost offended that Fall River, what do you mean we can't move people to Fall River anymore? And so there is a quagmire, there's a drama, but if you can't live in Fall River or New Bedford any longer, or Pittsfield, or there's a few communities, where are people going to live? So we acknowledge this as a major crisis. I would agree rent control is not the answer. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox we're working on, but they hit on the #1. Everybody who lives in their town is very happy in their town. You can afford your house. You can, afford the landscape or all that. You got to build. The housing shortage is critical. We're so far behind in hundreds of thousands of units, and it's going to affect you business people eventually. So when Chris mentioned, and the center and everything, this is the #1 issue. We need to build, and Fall River and New Bedford can no longer be the place to do it fully. So we need your partnership in that. It is #1, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Obviously, it's a very, very hot topic. If you didn't realize that before we started. An act relative to a livable wage for human service workers. Thank you all. Thank you for all your work eliminating the pay disparity between state workers and those employed by community-based human services not-for-profits. Where do we stand in getting through this?
I'll just be brief on it. When I first got elected 11 years ago, I would get a phone call or a letter or an email at least once or twice a month. Can you get me a job at the DPW? Can you get me a job wherever? Yeah, the lottery, wherever. I'm not that old where, that was the place. But last summer, I was at an event with the director of the DPW in Dartmouth. They were down 7 truck drivers. They didn't think they could fill the gap for the plowing for the winter, and he was really concerned about it. And if you live in Dartmouth, you drive downtown by Town Hall, they were actually taking applications and trying to get private companies to be able to plow in Dartmouth this year. So the idea that, what I look at is this is a problem everywhere. The benefits don't, in New Bedford, they're giving a $5,000 bonus to police officers to sign on. And almost every state agency, they're trying to do some type of bonus or some type of way to compete in the private sector. And I just think it's one of the cycles that we're going through is that everywhere, no matter if it's healthcare, look at the traveling nurses. We're paying 2 to 3 times as much for traveling nurses since COVID. And they're still being hired by SouthCoast and Hawthorne and everywhere else. It's a huge problem that we don't have enough employees. And so the idea that we have some magic to that, I don't know what it is. I have no idea. But every time there's an opportunity to find a solution for funding or creative ways to get rid of student loans for people in health and human service fields, I think we all are fighting for that. Any opportunity to encourage people to get involved in that business and try in that work, we do that. We try to subsidize child care. We did a whole bunch of work on child care and funding of different child care facilities so that they could supplement their income since COVID. Those are the things that we can try to do, but I think they're temporary. I honestly have no answer for the fact that everybody is looking for employees who are reliable, who are going to show up every day, who are going to be there and say, I don't feel like coming in on a Tuesday. The thought in my mind that is happening now is crazy. Or I don't want to come in, I'll work from home constantly. Those are things that had never happened before. I think it's unexpected to everyone from our sector as well as probably from your sector, and we're all trying to readjust. And I honestly have no answer for long-term ways of dealing with it.
Can I jump in here? Thank you. I hate to say this word, but it comes back to housing. People who are working in the private sector, in all of the things that we depend on most, childcare, personal care attendants, people who do the jobs that are difficult, we're not paying them. But here we go with the circular issue here. You can't afford to pay more. We can't afford to pay more. But you can't ask somebody to work in a job that requires so much compassion, so much patience, to work for $15 an hour. So, Chris is right. What's the answer? All of this stuff just keeps rolling around and around and around and coming back to how do we make more money and how do we increase the pie? Or I'll just tell you, I'm a big Star Trek fan. When are we going to stop using all of these things to create striations in our communities? When is it going to be about, okay, I get it, and I'm not going to raise the rent? Or I get it, and I can give medical insurance right now. So there are no answers. We constantly are trying to put in, we call them salary reserves, for people who are doing all of those extremely important jobs that they're not appreciated for. But as we learned during the pandemic, people can't go to work unless they have childcare. But what are we paying our childcare people? So I'll throw that out there as, what do we do? What do you think we do? Because we don't have the answers.
I'll shoot it. Again, it's supply and demand. We've been hearing for a long time about the aging of Massachusetts residents, and it's coming home to roost now. Ask our friends at UMass Dartmouth, right? In higher education, how changing demographics is affecting higher educational institutions. We see these smaller private higher educational institutions closing all the time now in Massachusetts because there's just not enough individuals. It really is exacerbated in the human service world. Our friends at JRI, our friends at People Inc., these individuals, their employees, I call them angels on earth. They do God's work every single day, and they do not get paid a lot of money. And traditionally, many of those roles were filled by our immigrant community. People ask me, I can't believe this is the 5th budget I've written as chair of Ways and Means. Is there anything that keeps you up at night? The one thing that's always kept me up at night is nursing homes. Nursing homes keep me up at night because that industry is in crisis. And it's in, and it's in crisis, and these are, they service the most vulnerable amongst us, our loved ones. And they can't get help. We have failed immigration policy in this country. We want to always close our borders. We should be opening our borders and welcoming these immigrants back into this country because we need them. We need them. And it's funny when, that certain governor down in Florida thought he was funny by sending all the migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard was like, thank you. Please send us more, right? Because guess what? These individuals are tremendous workers, right? They're coming to this country to work, and we need them. But we do definitely have a demographic issue that's affecting workforce throughout. It doesn't matter if you're building trades, healthcare, high tech, human services. The #1 issue amongst employers everywhere is workforce, workforce, workforce. Where did everybody go? How come I can't hire anyone? We've got so many openings in our firm. But it really is exacerbated in the human service industry because they perform jobs that are just necessary, and it's the one thing that keeps me up at night.
Thank you. What is the panel's thoughts on Bill 280, an act to ensure that public schools appropriately educate gifted students?
No?
Any gifted folks on this panel?
Whose bill is it? I mean, there's 6,200 bills, Mike. Unfortunately, sometimes there's not one that raises to the top of awareness.
I'll just say one thing on it is from the kid who spent 2 years in 6th grade.
Gifted one.
And all my kids were in the all my siblings were the gifted ones. That's why I've been successful in politics. But in all honesty, the biggest it's a legitimate concern, and we need to have dual enrollment. We spend a lot of money on special ed, transportation, and other things. If you were to look at the dynamics of the demographics of Diamond, New Bedford, Voc, New Bedford High, and Durfee, and you see the top 25%, and you see that they come from poorer families that are going to struggle to pay for their kids who are extraordinary students to get through college. Why aren't we trying to do that for them and challenge them to a degree where they're challenged even in high school with the dual enrollment at either BCC or UMass or Bridgewater State? Those things are just as important as a special ed, just as important as anything else. And I think you're seeing that now with the leadership at UMass embracing that. BCC has always embraced that. And I think it's the sell to the high schools to make sure that they have academics that can fit and support the scheduling of that. But I think that is one of them. It is incredibly important because it reduces the costs of a lot of education for incredibly bright kids. Incredibly bright kids who I look at the kids who I went to elementary school with, and I see where they are now, and they were way smarter than I was.
Which class?
And they just decided that the college couldn't afford it, their family couldn't afford it, or some reason that they didn't do it. And I think that this idea of taking the extraordinary students and getting them into the dual enrollment is incredibly important to give them the confidence that they can do it and reduce the cost of that education.
Just to add to Chris's, Durfee High School, Ed Lambert's here, I think, and he's aware of this because of the work he does every day. Durfee High School is a leader in the state for accessing through BCC, Bridgewater, UMass, Dartmouth, more involved now, but for early college. And I happened to be at their college signing day, hundreds of Durfee High School students there. And they were all going early college. They're all going in with 1-2 years of college under their belt, and that is to this effort of, communities with families that can't afford, maybe, but once they get a taste of it, once they get 2 years under their belt, and they've got a pathway right into the UMasses and the Bridgewaters, and it's amazing. And so we're accessing it, and we've just put in, I know in our budget, we're finalizing things. We put historic dollars on early college. I think about 100 million, Ed, is that? About 100 million. Incredible, because we know how important this is. It's happening at Durfee. It's beginning to happen at other schools. The pipeline is important. I think we've got to also look, we're expanding vocational programs so that we realize, the pendulum swings. Everybody's going to go to college. Well, maybe not everybody has to go to college, right? We have the building trades integrating into Durfee High School, I can speak to that one, to teach these kids construction management, whether it's hoisting and construction jobs, and unions are in there working with them. So we've got to continue to figure this out. And lastly, Secretary Howe was in a meeting with her the other day, and we're talking about this very subject. And I was thinking, all I read about, and I just read about it, MBTA, what do they say? We need like 10 years before we can fill the pipeline of jobs needed for MBTA, never mind nurses and others. But so what are we doing? What kind of jobs and how are we reaching into the high schools to ensure that the kids that aren't maybe going to go to college right away, that group of children are immediately aware of the opportunity that they have to walk into some very good paying jobs. But I'll end with, but it all comes back to housing. We want these immigrants to come in, and they're fulfilling some of these human service jobs. We have some of our human service agencies hiring from other countries now, just desperately trying to, work with the visa thing, and they got to have a special education to come in. They can't find them here, but yet when they come in and these lower paying jobs, where are they going to live? Where do these people live? So it comes back to housing. And so we are acutely aware, and we're figuring it out. And if you have ideas, please share them.
Happy to talk about education, Mike, with the Chamber and with my colleagues. We really need in our district schools, and I'm just going to advocate for this, in our district schools, Westport, Dartmouth, Acushnet, Freetown, we need to be able to offer more vocational courses. Diamond, Bristol Aggie, Greater New Bedford Voc are oversubscribed. Why? Because the kids see the practical education that they can get at those specialized schools. And the reality is, we don't have enough spots for those kids. We really need in Westport High, in Apponequet, in Dartmouth High, we need the ability to provide some of those practical courses and education and training that they're getting at the Diamonds and Aggies of this world. It's more expensive. Vocational training is more expensive than regular district training. So, and we've just done a fabulous thing for our New Bedfords and Fall Rivers. The Student Opportunity Act was way overdue. Really wonderful. Thank you, Michael, for the work you did on that. Thank you to all of us. But so they're in much better shape. Now we need to think about the Westports and Dartmouths of this world, Somersets of this world, and given the kids there the kind of training that is essential to their future. So glad we had a little opportunity to talk about that. By the way, I just want to get in a little something. Tony has been talking about a lot of important subjects just now, and he's been too modest to talk about a honor that he received last night up in Boston. No, really, come on. It doesn't happen to one of us every day. Yeah.
You got to tell us what it is.
Yeah, talking about the importance of immigration to our economy, to our nation. That's a guy who has done an awful lot to advocate for that sector. So, yeah, congratulations, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. But education obviously is a very passion of mine. I'm a former teacher. Well, once a teacher, always a teacher, right?
That's right.
And that's something that I always wanted to do. As a kid, that's what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to become a teacher, and I was able to accomplish that. And now, of course, public service, different kind of public service. But I don't know exactly, maybe if you had the title of the bill, maybe we could be, because as Carole said, we have just this session, over 6,000 bills have been filed, and about all kinds of things. But education, as Paul mentioned, around the Student Opportunity Act, that's probably one of the best pieces of legislation that we have done on the last 5 years at least. That has changed the formula of Chapter 70, the formula of how we distribute the money to the public schools. For New Bedford, just this year, if the budget stays the same on both sides for Chapter 70, New Bedford will be receiving $25 million more than the present school year. So come September, right? They're going to get $224 million in total. That's important. That's going to continue for the next, I believe we're on year 3, right?
Yep.
So 4 more years of similar amounts. And the numbers are very similar for Fall River or Brockton and other communities like that. And by the way, that changing formula was specifically done to help what we call gateway cities, places like New Bedford and Fall River and Lawrence, Lowell, and so forth, and Brockton, as you can, and Taunton too. So that, but I think we have to keep the school committees, or their feet to the fire, if you will. Got to make sure that money is spent in the classroom. In the classroom goes both not only for kids, but for teachers as well, right? So I think parents have a role here. Locally, that's where you can have a lot of impact. It's making sure that money is spent appropriately. It's spent in areas that's going to be creating opportunities for kids and for professionals as well in the business, right? So that's really something that is crucial for us in New Bedford. Talking about vocational education, we need to change the way the admissions are done. Right? It's a public high school, and right now to get in, it's like you are applying for a private school. Have you had any of your kids apply to a private school? It's pretty complicated, right? You got to have the grades, you got to have letters of recommendation, they got to write essays, they got to do a bunch of other stuff, right? Well, that's what's happening with vocational education to a certain degree, is the kids that probably would benefit a great deal from going to a vocational setting can't get in, because they also take in consideration attendance, how many times you've been absent from school, your behavior, right? So the whole works. Unfortunately, the regular high school cannot operate that way. You cannot kick anybody out. And they still have the option, if your kid goes to voc school, if they don't behave there, they can get kicked out. And where are they going to go? Back to the regular high school or the traditional classic high school. So we need to change the admission policies. I know some are resisting, because also it's being used to fund or to channel kids who really in the end want to go to college. And they think they're going to get a better education. They think it's going to be a safer place. So I have filed a bill on that, by the way, and some of my colleagues here are co-sponsors of that bill. And there is a Senate version of that bill as well. But the ideal would be that they get enough pressure that they actually change the policy on their own without us having to pass legislation. So I know there's a space, as Paul said, there's a need for additional expansion to create more classroom space, but that's not the solution, the only solution. The first solution should be, let's change the admissions policy. It's a public high school, it's paid by public dollars, so your kid should have the same opportunity to get into that school as any other kid. If you meet the 8th grade requirements, if you graduated from 8th grade, then you should be able to choose where you want to go, right? You want to go in New Bedford, for example, you want to go to New Bedford High School, or you want to go to the vocational high school. Right now, you don't have that choice as a parent, and your kid does not have that choice. So public schools should have admissions that create opportunity for everybody, of access. It's not a private school. You want to apply to a private school, you want to run a private school, fine. Set your own rules. So I think that's one of the things we need to change.
Can I just add one thing? This is something I think you, as business owners, and if you're a manufacturer, you really clearly can see, or engineering company. Tony touched on it a little bit, but the biggest thing is vocational schools have kids who are entering freshman year of high school at vocational schools with the intent to always go to college. And if you were to really analyze New Bedford, particularly, because I'm familiar with it a little bit more, but when vocational schools were in the 80s and 90s, the kids who went to them were the kids who were definitely not going to college. And it fit their needs. And it got them to reach their potential. They went to school half-time, academics, but they got to work with their hands. The kids in 8th grade who hate academics don't have the chance to go to vocational schools, because when their grades aren't good, their conduct isn't good, because they hate the academics. And now what do? Is we put them in an academic setting in a high school because they can't get into the vocational school because they don't have the good conduct. They don't have the good grades. They don't have the ability to go there. And we're defeating the purpose of vocational schools by providing services to kids who will never take advantage of the vocation that they're learning. So their success has essentially defeated the purpose of their existence. And what I think that the number one kids who should be going to the vocational schools are the kids who are struggling academically, who aren't the best in their class. At Dartmouth Middle School, I want to say 2 years ago, 97 kids out of the 350 went to Voc, or another high school from Dartmouth High. And so maybe 87 went to the vocational school. And that's in Dartmouth, where everybody who went to Dartmouth and moved into Dartmouth went there because of the education. And now they're leaving Dartmouth High to go to vocational school. So the concept of vocational schools, it's defeating its purpose, and we need to find a solution. A lot like Tony said, I don't particularly like the idea of randomly picking people or anybody who wants to go there. It should be focused on people who are going to get the best benefit. Government's purpose is to get people to reach their potential. If we're not getting this group of people to reach their potential, not only are they not reaching their potential, but what are they doing in the academic setting in the high school? They hate it. They're causing more problems. They're taking away the opportunities from the kids who are in the 50th percentile to the 40th percentile, who now have these interruptions in their class and can't get through a day without some type of issue going on and have unhealthy environment. So it actually really creates a problem in the public schools that don't have the vocational assets that a New Bedford Voc have, or a Diamond. So it's one thing to think about is how do we collectively, again, I don't have an answer. I keep saying it over and over again about vocational schools have exceeded their expectations. We need to figure out a solution to that, which I think reaches the people who are not going to go to college and give them the opportunity to go to the vocational schools.
Well, some of my friends are plumbers and electricians, and I can tell you they make a lot more money than I make.
Same.
Last question. What are your thoughts on mental health services as it pertains to youth who are out of school? Services are provided in schools, but there are just not enough services on the community side. The wait lists are 3 to 6 months long to receive services.
So I'll jump in and try to talk about that. The world as we know it, we're all discussing it today, is changing. And when we were growing up, nobody had any mental health problems. They were ignored. They'd come out in this kind of behavior because no one cared if I was mentally ill when I was young. But we've now had to face the fact that there are different stressors on kids. Kids, and I don't want to sound like, I'm 100 years old, but so many more families are only one parent. So many more families, if they're two, they have to work. Both of them have to work. And kids are in different places, very different places. So again, as we discovered with the pandemic was one of those things that opened this up for all of us. Kids need different things. And so now more and more and more we're seeing children with really, really significant behavior issues and inability to soothe themselves. I was this morning I was at the 5th grade graduation for my granddaughter, and they had the comfort dog there because there are kids who could not sit still. And they, you'd see them go into the comfort dog. Now, some people say, oh, that's a lot of baloney. But it's not a lot of baloney because you see it, as Dave said, it manifests itself in bad behavior. And everybody, again, here we go. We don't have the professionals. We don't have psychiatrists. We don't have nurse practitioners, although UMass Dartmouth is now doing a class of mastered nurse practitioners, especially in the psychiatric world. So we don't have enough. And this, we've known this with adults, but to open up your eyes now and see that there's kids suffering. I want to give a shout out to SouthCoast. A couple of years ago, I won't say how many, I went to them and said, we've got some really, really bad mental health issues in southeastern Mass. That's when they took it upon themselves to partner with, I've forgotten their name now, and open up the hospital in Dartmouth. Well, at that same time, I was begging them, can you do pediatrics? Can you do? adolescents. They didn't have the people. There was nobody to do it. We need social workers in school. We need, nurse practitioners, not only doctors, for all of those kids out there that aren't getting or are getting crazy things at home and can't do it. They can't adjust. So we need more professionals, and we need more people like SouthCoast to step up. I can't even tell you. We've had this, I'm going to just go crazy, but we've had this discussion all around the state of Massachusetts. Who's helping? Who's helping? Who's putting out more people to take care of this? We are, but it's not happening around the rest of the state. So this is going to just continue to be an issue unless people start realizing that it's not my world, where in the 1950s and 60s, oh my God, I'm that old, things were easier. I don't care what anybody says. Things were easier. Watching my granddaughter today as a 5th grader, I was in tears because I was so scared about, the things that she's dealing with that I never had to deal with. My kids never had to deal with. So it's a real issue. And again, I want to thank SouthCoast for stepping up. And I will admit that I do get some calls when we have children sitting 8, 9, and 10 days in an emergency room because there's nobody to help them and nobody to take care of them. So if you have kids, get them to go into psychiatry and all of these other things. But, it's funny, but it's not funny. It's scary. It's really scary. So I know he wants to talk.
No, I don't know what the hell happened to me today. I'm actually talking. I should have pulled a Howitt. Don't say a word and leave early. The genius of the Republicans.
We love each other. Can you tell? Don't leave because we talk about you.
Couple things. If you delve into the problem again, and the idea is to try to give you guys a sense of where the problems are, as Pat mentioned it briefly, is the personnel. You don't have the doctors. There's no doctor. You can go anywhere in the state just about. They're non-existent unless you live in Metro West and Wellesley or Weston or Needham or Newton, where they have private practices. They can get paid $250 an hour to see their kid, and it's easy to do. One of the benefits of COVID that's come out of this is telemedicine and the ability to have counseling on Zooms and things like that. Initially, people were reluctant to it. It seems that everybody has been satisfied with the way in which it's working, even the insurance companies. So that's kind of a wave of the future, I think, is to have that telemedicine type stuff that can make it easier. But we need more people in the field, and you could go around the whole country and come to that conclusion that why go to medical school and end up in psychiatry? Well, telemedicine's the way to do it now because you can make a shitload of money sitting in your house listening to someone. That's my thought on it is essentially we got to work towards getting more people in the practice, and the way to do it is make it easier for them to get there.
Tony, we're going to have to cut it off after you.
Okay. I'll be very quick. Yeah, but some of it has to do with resources.
That's what I was just gonna
It's
add.
important to treat mental health as like any other illness that you might be facing, right? Be physical or mental. So resources are important. You can go to SouthCoast. You can go to the emergency room, by the way, of St. Luke's. And sometimes they have young kids sitting there for more than one day. And maybe they can tell you actually how many days. I'm just being conservative on the number of days. Because they can't find a bed for those kids. They shouldn't be in the emergency room. They shouldn't be admitted to a regular bed in the hospital. They need to go to the appropriate place. It's not enough beds, so we need more resources. So parity is important between in mental health. There's no one more stronger on this issue than actually the Senate President. And Senator Rodrigues can probably speak to how forceful, how important, how good of an advocate she is on this issue. So, but it is resources as well, not just the lack of professionals in the field. And sometimes, I mean, the state budget that we're talking about for the next fiscal year is around $56 billion, right? Almost half of that, and Michael probably can give you better numbers, is for human services, including, of course, Mass Health. So, yeah, we need to find more resources, and we got to treat mental health just like any other illness.
Tony, didn't we recently mandate the legislature that mental health has to be considered at the same level as
I believe
normal
we
healthcare?
did. I believe we did that mental health parity, but the insurance companies have to catch up with us.
Well, we got to push on them. We got to push on them, but the mandate is there.
Yeah.
Real quick. For years, it's hard to believe, but I'm the same age as SouthCoast as far as the legislature. I just celebrated my 27th anniversary in the legislature. And for years, it was all about stigma, right? Ending the stigma. Being able to admit when you have a mental health or behavioral health issue that you need addressed and not be ashamed of it and not be afraid to address it. We're beyond that now. And now it's all about staffing in workforce. I can tell you that, as Tony alluded to, the Senate president, a lot of times in our job, we bring our own personal experiences to work with us every day, and she's been very open about the fact that her dad, World War II vet, growing up, she grew up in a household where her dad had some significant behavioral mental health issues, and it's been a focus of ours. During the so-called ARPA bill, when we all passed an ARPA bill, we put $200 million into a behavioral health trust fund, and we established a commission made up of professionals to determine how would the best invest this $200 million to address the issue. The report was just completed about 3 weeks ago, and we, in the Senate version of the budget that we passed last week, we invested that $200 million in behavioral health issues, primarily around workforce, things like scholarships, things like student loan repayments, encouraging young folks to get into the behavioral health, mental health world in many, and there's many levels to do that. We have invested a lot of money in beds, but a bed is no good if you don't have staff to service the bed, right? And we have a long way to go. I was actually with the Secretary, Health and Human Services, of the $52 billion, Health and Human Services is 62% of the budget. Yep, 62%, and that includes Mass Health and Medicaid, health care, which is why they're overwhelming. She was talking about children in the emergency department over 100 days. Many of these children are DCF involved. They don't have a parent. Who's the best advocate for a child? Is a parent, of course, right? But if a child doesn't have a parent, or is a DC, they act, they have behavioral health issues, they just get lost in the emergency department. I'm looking at our friends at SouthCoast because they know they have to live with it every day. So it's an issue that we know about, we're working on, we're investing in, and we're going to continue. It will continue to be a priority of ours. From pediatrics to adolescents to geriatric, the whole gamut of behavioral and mental health.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists for joining us today. We'd also like to thank the following who helped make today possible. Our friends at Rachel's Lakeside La France Hospitality. That's a tongue twister. For our luncheon today. Dave LeBeau from Lightworks for providing the sound. And again, thank you to our sponsors, SouthCoast Health, St. Anne's Credit Union, and Southeastern Mass Visitors Bureau. And lastly, please join us for our next Business After Hours, as Eileen mentioned earlier, sponsored by St. Anne's Credit Union on Thursday, June 22nd at the Cove, and you can register at onesouthcoast.com. Thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
Yeah,